Hello, colleagues, and welcome to the next episode of DINCast, where I've got something a little bit different for you today. We're looking at a disruptive retailer, and I'm delighted to be joined by Kim Wylie, who is the Global Director of People and Change at Farfetch. Welcome along, Kim.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you as well. So for those people who don't know you, or in particular may not have heard of sort of Farfetch, do you want to sort of just tell us a little bit about yourself, your leadership journey, and what Farfetch does?
Yeah, absolutely. So I won't bore you with all of the details, but I will say that my leadership journey probably started with a failed attempt to work at McDonald's as a student. They didn't even want to interview me, but I would say thankfully it's been uphill since then. So the short journey is I grew up in New Zealand, hence the slightly hybrid accent. Went into finance after university, which was desperately boring for me, and then made a switch to working for Thomson Reuters, which is kind of legal publishing, and that's where I got my first taste of being in a training type role. And I would go around New Zealand training the lawyers and accountants on the products, the digital products that we had as a business. Then I decided I wanted to do a bit of a leap and try out the world outside of New Zealand, and jumped across to London to do my 2 year working holiday in London. It's 15 years now, and I'm still here. Most of that 15 years has been spent at Google. A little bit of time working for an advertising agency before Google. 12 years at Google, lots of different roles there, which we can maybe dig into a little bit as we go through. And then the last 2 years at Farfetch. And so for those of you who maybe haven't come across Farfetch, Farfetch is a tech platform for the luxury fashion industry. So we've got a number of different businesses. Our Farfetch.com marketplace is possibly the one that, if you do know about Farfetch, you'll know about that side of the business. It's the consumer-facing part of the business. But then we have multiple other B2B components to the business as well, where we white label our platform and systems for other luxury fashion retailers, and outsource all of the tech that sits behind things. So there's a lot of there's actually for a company, we're about 5,000 people now at Farfetch. There's actually a lot of complexity that sits behind the scenes. So what else can I share? We publicly listed on the New York Stock Exchange 2 years ago, just after I joined, actually, so I timed that well. And just to give a sense, we're, as I said, 5,000 people. We're in about 13 different countries in terms of the employee base, but our products, we service 190 countries with the offerings, and we basically connect boutiques and brands with sellers. So we've got 3,000 boutiques and brands. We connect them with sellers all over the world. So we actually don't own the product for the marketplace, at least, but just to give a little flavour.
Wow, I mean that is some business, and to sort of get my head around it, I suppose you coming in suddenly, you're a global director of people. You've got 5,000 people to sort of look after and develop and help them learn and things like that. So I mean, that must have been quite daunting when you sort of first started. I just wondered how you've been able to adapt to working in this world.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's actually. So I report into our Chief People Officer, and my remit is specifically people development, change management for our internal change, embedding new tools and systems and products and so on, and then also some of the elements surrounding our culture and engagement. But yeah, it was daunting, but that's part of the reason I took it on. I had not done a job like this at Google, and I think, just from a leadership perspective, one of my personal philosophies is that you always get more from taking on those things that are the opportunities that scare you. If you're a bit scared about whether you can do it or not, that means it's probably a good thing to have a whirl of. So I'd never done this type of work before. It was daunting, but I think as well, if you surround yourself with people you can bounce ideas off, and you're just really open as well with people about what you do and don't know, people will help you out and guide you when you need the support.
And I suppose, as I say, that would have been daunting enough if we hadn't had a global pandemic come along and hit us. And I just wondered how you and Farfetch have had to adapt, and how your thinking has changed during 2020.
Yeah. So I think actually, when I compare maybe the adaptation that we've had to make maybe with some other more traditional organizations, it possibly has been a slightly easier journey. And what I mean by that is we are a digital first company. We're only 10 years old as a business, or just over. Everything is digital from the outset. We already had the tools in place. We already worked in quite a global way. So the idea of doing video conferences was very much embedded in the way that we operated before there was no option for that. So I think from that respect, the transition's not been as challenging as maybe for some organizations who didn't already have that muscle memory of how do you do stuff when you're sitting at home. But of course, it's thrown up a lot of challenges, and I think particularly for managers who've not had to, if they've not managed global teams before, this concept of managing remotely, I think is a challenging one. But we've really leaned into at the start of the pandemic, which I think has set us on a really great track, is that the executives really stepped up the communications that they had with the business. So we went from having company-wide all hands once a quarter to a company-wide all hands once a week, and the kind of the approach we had changed, and it was all about, we had a global Q&A Slack channel for the whole business, and everyone would just pile in with their questions. We'd vote them up and down, and then the exec would just be on hand every week to answer people's questions. We also use that to highlight, I guess, and showcase from the execs how they're coping with the new world. So there's one moment that's kind of etched into my memory of our CFO on the company-wide all hands, literally folding his washing while he's doing the company all hands and answering Q&A. You got 5,000 people on a video call, you're just folding your washing. It was tea towels, there was no pants or anything embarrassing involved, but I just, little I guess these little micro moments of bringing some humanness and some authenticity and, hey, we're all in this together, I think has been hugely impactful.
And in terms of, you mentioned a little bit about sort of culture. I just wondered, you've probably recruited quite a few people to Farfetch during sort of that. And I just wondered how you've had to change the onboarding experience, but how do you get across the Farfetch culture in that respect?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you're right that, we've hired hundreds of people during this pandemic. And I think a couple of things that have, and I guess it still remains to be seen how they're still reasonably new in the business. So the couple of people I've had join my team have been absolute superstars. So I think our approach has worked. But we have reasonably recently rolled out a new philosophy around hiring, where interviews there's 3 different components of the interviews. There's a good for role interview, which is the typical things. Have you got the skills to do the thing we're asking you to come and do? There's a good for Farfetch interview, and this is the values piece, where we really want to check, has this person demonstrated in the past that their values are actually similarly aligned to the Farfetch values? And just to give a flavour, the sorts of values we have are think global, be human, be revolutionary, amaze customers, and so on. So we check that cultural alignment, whether people feel like they're going to be able to demonstrate those types of things. And then the last interview, we focus on good for growth. And one of the challenges that we have as a high growth business, things are changing super, super quick for us. And we've realized that actually we were seeing some people drop out of the business not long after they joined, and they just weren't able to keep up with, I guess, the pace. you can join this month and next month your roles change or you need to do something different. And some people love that. Some people, it's kind of freaks them out. So we wanted to try and get on the front foot of that and look for those people who've got that growth mindset and ability to thrive in ambiguity and so on. So that good for growth interview is also a really core component part of us, how we bring people in. Then just from a tactical piece, you have to do the onboarding remotely. So you courier out. I mean, being in the business that we're in, we've got pretty good relationships with DHL and couriers and so on. So we get the laptops and bits out to people, and then we bring them together for a virtual onboarding experience. So onboarding, similar to all the other programs my team has been looking after, we've had to flip that to make it designed in a way that is digestible, engaging, brain friendly, and so on in a virtual world, which is slightly different than a classroom.
Yeah, I bet it is. I mean, that's one of the questions my members sort of are asking around. Well, actually, we used to be able to come together in an office. We can't do that anymore. How do we make sure that, we look after people, they understand what's going on? So it's really interesting. And I just wondered from your point of view, it sounds like Google has really prepared you for this role, but what were sort of the main differences or similarities between those two, fast, rapid growing organizations?
Yeah, and people ask me this a lot, actually. When I joined Google, it was a similar size to what Farfetch was when I joined. They were both about 3,000 people. It's hard now to go, gosh, Google used to be 3,000 people, but it was about 3,000 people when I joined. So actually having, the experiences have been pretty similar in terms of high growth, craziness, ambiguity, massive ambitions, people who are really passionate about the work that gets done and motivated to just deliver a great product or experience to the customers. So there's many more similarities than there are differences. I would say people at Farfetch are probably dressed slightly better, if I can say that, but I won't say that too loudly, but it's probably true. But actually, there's, and for me, part of the reason I joined Farfetch, I love Google, had an incredible experience there. It was a scary decision for me to make, to go, why would I let, everyone aspires to work at Google. Like, why would you even think about leaving? And it was this alignment in terms of the culture and the pace and the opportunity, from a personal perspective, the opportunity to step in and shape a team and try and have a bit of a bigger impact in a company that's slightly smaller. So,
and you've touched on this pace and this sort of appetite for growth and things, and as I say, layered upon that with the pandemic, you are likely to be having some personal and team well-being issues sort of come up. So I just wondered, through sort of Farfetch's duty of care, how do you spot and how do you look after individual and team well-being?
Yeah, and that is the question of 2020, I think, is the well-being piece, because there's the challenge that we all have when we're now working from homes. The lines are very blurred. Like, the commute used to be the at least for me, my commute was like, you have to create that brain space. I've tried to recreate that, but I don't know if you can see in the back, I've got this Peloton in the back. Now I commute, so I get on that. That's my morning commute. And I realized if I don't get on that before going from the bedroom to the desk, I'm just in a totally different mindset. And I guess that's just a personal example. But to your point about well-being, so we've done a lot around this space. So if I just kind of list off some of the things we do, one of the things we do, we've partnered with a company called Unmind, which people might be familiar with, I guess, kind of headspacey, or there's a lot of different apps out there at the moment. But Unmind, we've found really, really useful, and every Farfetch globally has an account with Unmind, and there's meditations, there's stretching exercises, there's check-ins, there's a huge variety of tools. And just as an example, one of the things that we do in my team meetings every week, when we have our weekly meeting, we always start by doing an Unmind exercise together. So we'll just go through a meditation or a mindfulness or a stretching exercise, something off that platform. So we integrate the tools into our processes, I guess. Other things that we did, we gave every employee 2 days, 2 caring days. So days that you would take off and you would book in. It's like an extra allocation of leave that you would to use for caring for loved ones or caring for yourself as well. That was also a valid request. So just to give people a little bit of space and time. We run yoga sessions and stretching sessions internally across the team. And actually, as a people development function, we're in a position where people come to virtual sessions with us, and so we kind of have this opportunity to infuse some well-being micro moments into the programs that we deliver.
And sort of hopefully optimistically looking forward, I just wondered what your views might be about the kind of changes to organisational design will take place in the future, bear in mind what COVID has shone a light on. How do you think, Farfetch's vision might change about the kind of organisation and the way the organisation is designed in the future?
Yeah, so I think I'm not sure if organisations need to change how they're designed. I would say that the way an organisation design should be aligned to their philosophies, irrespective of things like COVID. We've already been a global organisation. I think principally having a more compressed hierarchy, pushing decision making to the people who are closest to the decisions, those types of things I think are going to be more important, at least for a business like us that's already digital, that's already global. We're already in global teams. I think it's less about the org structure and the design from that perspective.
And you've talked a bit about sort of experimentation, and with experimentation, particularly in the field of innovation, comes failure. And a lot of organisations are not necessarily designed to cope well with failure. And I just wonder, is there anything sort of you can share about how Farfetch goes about on these discovery journeys, and how you can sort of learn from things that don't perhaps go as well as expected?
Yeah, and I think this is such an interesting topic, because I think sometimes you hear this like you have to celebrate failure and so on. And I think you've got to celebrate failure in the right moments. You've got to celebrate failure when it is a result of trying to solve really complex problems that have never been solved before. When you're in an environment of extreme complexity and there is no clear-cut answer to something, you have to, maybe one of the other ways of phrasing or of framing the failure piece is around, other than failure, talking about learning quickly. So make small mistakes fast, because then you never get the big failures, because you've incremented your way through and then you navigate yourself to a moment where the problem is actually solved. So I think the word failure probably freaks people out a bit, but if you talk about learning fast and, with complex problems, there is no one answer. You have to try stuff and figure it out. If there was one right answer, it's not a complex problem, and then the experimentation is not needed. But you have to then also create, I guess, the psychological safety within the teams so that people feel like they can share the stuff that they're trying and that's working and that's not working.
Final sort of question, really, in terms of, you've obviously led on lots of sort of transformation and change programs, and I was reading sort of I think it was a PwC report, something like 75%, 3 in 4 change transformation programs don't end up in either success or they don't deliver the outcomes around that. What do you sort of personally look at to try and make sure any program you're leading on has as great a chance of success as possible?
Yeah, great. And that's the stats that have been around for ages. Like that stat has been around for ages. So I think a couple of things to call out. People systematically underestimate the effort that is needed to help people change their behavior. Just by giving a new piece of technology does not mean that the people start using it properly. So actually, when I was in my previous role at Google, leading the change management practice, and I was doing change programs and transformation programs with customers externally, never ever once did I hear, gosh, I did too much change management. Okay, so you always hear, oh, I wish I just invested a bit more in helping people to understand what's going on and what's expected of them. And change, and I'm trying not to get too detailed into the neuroscience of change, because I can go off on one here, but change is really, we're hardwired to resist change as humans, because change represents a threat, and our brains say this is a bad thing for us to do. So you've got to really understand how people deal with change, and then create the conditions that support them to be able to move forward. So I often talk about, if you use the head, heart, feet model, that is a good checklist for creating the right conditions. And head is making the rational connection. So helping people understand, how does this change connect with the big picture, the mission, the vision, the strategy of the organization. So you bring some certainty to what it is that's the objective and how things fit together. Then you have to make an emotional connection with people. What's in it for them, and how can they step up and get involved? Because typically as adults, we want to contribute, we want our voices to be heard, we want to shape the things that impact us. So you have to create the conditions for people to contribute. And then the third piece is around the feet, which is, how do you help people take those steps forward? And that's really about giving people the training, the education, the knowledge and ability to operate successfully in whatever that new world looks like. Because people are often scared of change because they think, they're an expert in the old way of doing things. They're not going to be an expert in the new way of doing things. You've got to make them create those conditions for them to feel like they can operate successfully in whatever the new world is. So training, support, all that jazz.
Well, look, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, Kim, and find out how well you're doing. And I think I'll be off to sort of, Google what Black Friday deals might have been on Farfetch and what have you. But thank you so much for sharing those insights. There's so much there for people to sort of take away with. And if I probably won't speak to you before Christmas, I hope you have a fantastic break with the family and everybody.
Thanks a lot, Ian. You too. Take care.